Okay, guys, so we are combining section 6.4 and 6.5 into these set of notes because what we're looking at now are special parallelograms. All right, so these are parallelograms, all right, that have additional properties outside of the 7 that we already talked about in section 6.2, okay? So the 3 that we're talking about today, rectangle, squares, and rhombus, all right, are all parallelograms. Now, because they're a parallelogram, that means that they still have those 7 properties that we talked about. So the opposite parallel sides, opposite congruent sides, opposite congruent angles, but they just have more special properties, okay? So we're going to start with a rectangle. And the cool thing that I really like about rectangles is that we know what they are, all right? But the definition is a little bit different than what we normally describe. So what a rectangle is it's a parallelogram, right? So it's first of all significant that it has that word in there, all right? Because by saying it's a parallelogram, it's saying include those 7 properties that we've already talked about, all right? But the additional property is that it has to have 4 congruent angles, all right? Now, we know that with rectangles, they're 4 right angles, all right? But that's because if you take that 360 and divide it by 4, you get the 90 degrees, all right? So to draw that picture, guys, all right, we're going to go ahead and draw a picture of what we know to be a rectangle, okay? And we know that all 4 of those angles have to be right, okay? Now, because we know that it's a parallelogram, we also know that the sides are, the opposite sides are congruent, all right? We know that the opposite angles are congruent. We know that the consecutive angles are supplementary. All right, we also know that the diagonals bisect, et cetera, okay? All right, let's actually pop down to a rhombus. So a rhombus is, once again, it's a parallelogram, all right? So it has all 7 of those properties, but this time it has with 4 congruent sides, all right? So to draw that, you're going to draw like a slanted square. And so this is still a parallelogram, all right? But the difference is that we now have all 4 sides to be congruent, okay? Now, there's a reason why I wanted you guys to go rectangle, rhombus, and then to square, and that's because the square is the most special property, because what a square is it's a parallelogram, all right, that has 4 congruent angles and 4 congruent sides. Let's break this down. The fact that it's a parallelogram with 4 congruent angles means that it has to be a rectangle. But the fact that it's a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides, which means that it has to be a rhombus. So a square is a rhombus, it's a rectangle, it's a parallelogram, it's a quadrilateral, it's a polygon. It's all of those things, which means it has all of the properties, okay? So the square, all right, if we would draw it, has the 4 right angles, the 4 congruent angles, and the 4 congruent sides, all right? So when I say you want to be a square, it's because it's the most special parallelogram. It has the most special properties in it. Okay, so we aren't going to go through all of these, okay? So if we are going to talk about the Venn diagram. So it says that within this Venn diagram, we're talking about parallelograms, all right? And on one side of these special parallelograms, we're going to have rhombi, all right? And rhombi is parallel for rhombus, okay? So rhombi, I think it's with 2 eyes, not positive. I think it's actually just with 1, okay? All right, and then we have rectangles over here, and then where they overlap, all right, is the square. So this is the only time when a rectangle can be a rhombus is whenever it's a square, okay? We're not going to do this section right here, all right? We've talked about converse, inverse, and contrapositive. You guys could do that on your own, all right? But we are going to go to this always, sometimes, or never. So if you look at the first one, it says a square is a rectangle. Is this always, sometimes, or never true? All right, this is always true. A square will always be a rectangle because a square will always have 4 congruent angles, okay? Let's pop down below that, though, and it says a rectangle is a square. Well, this is only sometimes true. A rectangle can be a square only when the 4 sides are all congruent, all right? Let's go straight across. A rhombus is a quadrilateral. This is always true. All right. A rhombus will always have 4 sides. Now for B, a rectangle is a rhombus. This one always sparks a little controversy in class. All right. This is sometimes true. And a lot of students will say never, but there's only one case when a rectangle is a rhombus, and that's whenever that parallelogram is a square, all right, because a square is everything. So I'm going to pause there. All right, I'm going to come back. We're going to do a bunch of other theorems, and then we're going to apply them.